so that we can keep track. Wonderful. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Andrea and I am the External Affairs Officer at Futurity. Thank you for joining us for our 7th event. Today we have a really special guest, Cecilia Tham, and she will talk to us more about deep tech and how it's shaping the future and the reality we live in. We will have a deep dive into how she's contributing to deep tech and her visions for the future, and also have a look into her amazing experiences and work that she's done in this field so far. So just a quick overview about Women in Power. Women in Power is a community for women that are working in tech and that want to break into the industries. And through this community, we try to create a conversation around why it's important to have diversity in the field and how we can do it best. One of the ways we are doing it is by inviting outstanding speakers and outstanding examples to share their stories, their point of views, and also insights into their industries, so that more women across the world can be inspired by them. Till far, we have been focusing on connecting the Asian community, but since our teammates are from all over the world, we are expanding to Europe as well. We are venturing into a new geographical area too. And no one better than Cecilia to help us in the first event, as she is originally from Hong Kong and then moved around the world to the United States, where she earned her degrees. She had her master's degrees in architecture from Harvard, and then she moved to Barcelona, where she started multiple ventures, and she's a really great entrepreneur. And currently, she's also co-founder of All Women, which is a school that focuses on teaching women about AI. And she will talk about it later, as All Women is today's partner. About Kufinity, which is our main co-organizer, which I'm the External Affairs Offices of. Kufinity is Malaysia and Hangzhou-based cross-border tech accelerator that helps international talents expand across Asia and enter China. And we have talent incubation, technology lending, and acceleration services. Currently, we are serving one of the largest tech incubators in China, and are also having the Global Technology Leadership Program, which empowers international digital youth entrepreneurs from top universities across Asia succeed in the digital age. The team has successfully led more than 10 market access projects and worked with more than 80 startups so far. We are very glad to have Kufinity as one of our main supporters that have been with us since the beginning, and we feel very empowered by their initiative and also by their services. And now about All Women. So All Women builds rewarding careers in technology by upskilling or boosting profile to thrive professionally in rapidly growing sector by teaching women about AI and how AI is applied. And perhaps Cecilia can introduce about them a bit later too. And now, Cecilia, I would like to pass the word to you to introduce yourself and tell us about your background and why do you think it's important to be involved in deep tech, and what is your progress so far and how are you contributing to it?
Thank you so much, Andrea, and hello, everyone. My name is Cecilia Tham, and I am based out of Barcelona. I've been here practicing for almost 20 years now, but I am originally from Hong Kong. I grew up in Macau, and I studied in the US. And my journey into deep tech started, to be honest, back when I wanted to go into medicine and studied biology, and I really wanted to go into the field of neuroscience. But unfortunately, I didn't get good enough grades, couldn't get into medical school, but it gave me a foundation of understanding science and the rigor behind scientific research and technologies. And so I think I'm very lucky because I transitioned into from kind of the rigorous the rigorous and the scientific background into the more kind of conceptual, imaginative design realm, and where I studied architecture. And I think a lot of my work actually kind of bridge between these two worlds, and I think that's super important. And so the journey continues, and while I have the scientific kind of thinking and the design capabilities, I also realized that I needed a third kind of prong into this process, which is real life experiences. And here we're talking about, startup experiences, business ventures. And so moving here to Barcelona in the last 20 years, I've had 6 ventures now. Some of them are more directed to science and others not. So with these 3 kind of, trifecta, I think it was all of these 3 together gave me a little bit of an advantage of thinking of how to develop deep tech in a creative sense, but with an understanding of how to strategically think about those ventures.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Cecilia. That's really great to see how your career has shifted and how you've been exploring different fields. So from the point of view of your woman being, has there been any challenges that you faced in the different fields that you worked on, since they are very related to scientific field, and then in deep tech as well? Or has it been all good for you and smooth, and haven't seen any trouble in that?
I wish I could say that. I wish we could say that everything is, smooth sailing. I think regardless of whether you're male and female, there are always obstacles, right? But I do think that female entrepreneurs do encounter more issues. And one of the things that we have looked into is that we did a data science project trying to understand where the bottlenecks when it comes to women in tech, and especially in deep tech. And so we were looking at in 4 different areas. We looked at in business and also in sciences. And then we also look into that are not deep tech related, which is in entertainment, in movies, and also in sports. But the pattern is the same, which means that we look from bottom up and looked at, well, how is women involved in this field? And then we go up the ladder and then looked into, well, then how are women, are women studying these fields? Are they getting good notes from these fields? Are they getting jobs in these fields? And then you move all the way up, which is the highest one, which is accolades, right? And so if we look at the science field and we use the Nobel Prize, for example, as the top of the kind of the epic focus, we see that in the beginning it's fairly equal, but as soon as we go up the ladder, when we enter into university, when someone else makes those decisions for us, we then begin to see biases. And so every time we apply for a job, every time we apply for a scholarship, every time we apply for being awarded for the Nobel Prize, it keeps chipping into those biases until in the very, very top, there are far and few of those in representation. And so up until, I believe, last year, there was only one other woman who had ever won the Oscar, for example, in the 100 years of Oscar, right? So this is worrisome because this represents that there's an externalities that is being kind of applied to us. And sometimes we might not even be aware of it as women within going through these different obstacles. And so as a society, I wanted to make sure that when we're talking about women in tech and all of these biases that are happening, it's not just a conversation about women, by women, to women. It is actually an issue society-wide. And unless the whole entire society is invested into making equality, at level, we're just talking to, you know, a fraction of those that are affected.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. And I wanted to ask you more about all women, since you've mentioned how you want to make sure that women are empowered. And so would you give us an introduction about what all women is and how is it empowering women? And if you would like to share the screen, just let us know anytime.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Start with All Women first. So All Women is a platform to teach women in tech, especially funneling, creating the pipeline for women in tech in the role of leadership. And so what we have created is a platform where we invite women teachers and professors and experts that are in the field of AI, in project management, in UX UI, and we might be even starting, you know, quantum soon, but any of these areas that are kind of focusing and applying the layer of technology into their field. And so we're also very much focused on creating that leadership role. And the reason is because to talk about technology and to be proactive about technologies far more than being able to code, right? You need to be able to speak the language, you need to understand kind of the possibilities and opportunities, and you also need to understand the limitations of it. And so being aware of this, and a lot of the women that are on our platform, and All Women, they already have degrees, they're biologists, they're lawyers, and they wanted to be able to understand, okay, well, how can I add AI into this field? How can I talk to the developers so that we are in the same page and in terms of understanding how to implement those solutions. And I think we wanted to kind of target that group of women in leadership positions to be able to really create an added value to what they already are excel at. Yeah. So should I share my?
Yes. Yes. Feel free to do so. The way we structure the call is that Cecilia is going to share with us about what deep tech actually is and have an overview of the current technologies. And then we will have some questions from us, from the organizers about her projects. And then we will also open the floor to the participants to ask their own questions too. And yes, feel free to start, and cannot wait. Thank you, Cecilia.
Great. Thank you so much. I can talk forever on this topic. So for keeping time's sake, you know, maybe I'll ask Andrea to just keep me in check. And so I do want to leave time for questions at the end and have a conversation with all of you. So, but I do want to kind of go through a little bit certain things that we needed to keep in mind when we're talking about deep tech, because it is very different from, you know, your various different technology project, especially compared to like digital solutions like an app. So a little bit about us. We are, I'm a founder of Futurity Systems, and I've been kind of sort of all over the map. Landed in Barcelona. I don't know if you all know Barcelona, but it's one of these cities that you kind of just never wanted to leave. So I've been here, based out of here. I do have a background in biology, but I also have a background in technology, in architecture and design. And these two worlds actually work very well together. And this other leg that I talked about, these different ventures. I want to mention that I spent some time at Telefonica, which is a telecommunication company based out of Spain, but they're all over the world. At that time in 2017, they wanted to launch this long-term thinking kind of department called Alpha, and what they call a moonshot unit, where they combine kind of a technology with social impact. And so my role was actually a social technologist to kind of understand the intersections of these things. But more important than not here, I wanted to kind of start people to thinking about long-term thinking, which deep tech requires, because the horizon for incorporating some of these technology, especially if it is biology driven or biotech based, they take a much longer horizon than it does in your regular return of investment of a product that a company is familiar with. And so we at Futurity System, we provide futures as a service. This means that we have this 360 service where we start with research and analysis, which is super important in understanding the particular topic at hand. But we take this data and then we try to map that particular future. So that future could be 5 and 10 years in the runway, but understanding that context with that forecasting it is necessary for us to have an overview. Then from there, we design within that context. We design the object, we design the service, we design a product that is necessary within that context. And then we backtrack and create an assessment and roadmap to understand what are some of the intermediary steps for us to be able to get to those futures that we want and need. And when we're talking about futures, something that we need to keep in mind is that that industry also has evolved. Until very recently, we have been kind of taking in a more of a backseat role. We're doing forecasting, we can do some predictions, we can map certain futures, and we can even shape it. But nowadays, I wholeheartedly believe that we have the tools to actively build those futures. And so now that we have those tools, we should actually get involved in being proactive about building these futures that we want. Now, this is probably a chart that a lot of you have seen. It's your kind of typical, how do you grow from a company's perspective? And you can grow in 2 ways. You can grow with creating new products, or you can grow in launching in new markets. And these are the 2 typical ways of growing. But when you're talking about deep tech, and when you're talking about things that are beyond these new markets and new products, you actually need to look at 2 things. Those 2 things are your opportunities and your threats. Then these are game-changing opportunities and existential threats, not your kind of your typical day-to-day type of aspects. No, and we call this area next and beyond. To be intentional in targeting these things, we need to have a framework, and the framework that we use, we call it futurescaping. And I will walk you through now. I just wanted to explain a little bit of the anatomy, but let's deep dive a little bit as an example later. But the anatomy is super simple. You start with a couple of different starting points. So for example, maybe the deep tech that you're looking into here is autonomous vehicles. And then the other aspect of it is how it might impact your day-to-day life. And so these are your 2 starting points. You create what we're calling the seed. And then you start forcing yourself and your team to think about the consequences that might happen out of this. And so some of the consequences will be positive. So hence here are the opportunities that we talked about earlier. Some of these will be negative consequences, and these could be the threats that we talked about. And so the negative consequences, then in turn, you need to preemptively think about solutions, or you think about not going through that particular way so that you can avoid those negative consequences. And the positive ones obviously then becomes opportunities that you need to make sure that you're aware of in the radar. And the neutral ones could be good or bad, but the idea is the same, that it could potentially give you an idea of how to proceed. This tool allows us to find out some of the answers about the unknown world that we are confronting, and from different perspectives. And so here's an example of what that futurescape map looked like. And we're going to continue that example of the autonomous vehicle becoming mainstream, zooming into it. So the autonomous vehicle is the seed, and this is where we're starting to propagate some of the consequences. So let me walk you through one of the branch. So in a world where autonomous vehicles becoming mainstream, we don't need to drive cars anymore. That's great. That I would put it in the green spot, but because I hate driving, but my partner would be, he loves to drive, so he would, consider that as a pity. So we came into an agreement. We said, let's keep it gray. So let's force ourselves to think a little bit more. So if you don't need to drive the car anymore, then essentially we can add other activities while we're in the car, because now we're free from driving, and that's a good thing, right? And then this becomes an opportunity that we can add certain, layers to it. So maybe we can then live in a car. Could we think of a possibility of autonomous trailer homes, or work in the car and have autonomous co-working office? So instead of us going to the office comes to us. And same thing with, autonomous restaurants. And so same thing, that instead of us going to the restaurant will come to us. So all of these are possibilities that we can consider if one day the autonomous vehicle become mainstream. Let me show you another branch so that you can get that illustration of, the negative impact that could happen. Obviously, there'll be far fewer traffic accidents. That's definitely green. That will lead to fewer speeding tickets because everything has been, based out of algorithm, and there should be far fewer accidents and speedings. But that might lead to a decrease in revenue for the municipalities. Now, I'm not saying that, let's not have autonomous vehicles because the municipalities will have far fewer revenue. Here, we need to put weight in understanding that the benefits far outweigh the negative consequences. But this gives us an indication of like, wait, if this is going to happen, maybe we need to start looking for other sources of revenue for the municipality so that we won't arrive to a point where this might impact the operations for the government. Yeah. So as we're doing this exercise, we often think about multiple different layers: the economic layer, the social layer, even the sustainable environmental layer, and you can extend this to the political layer and so on and so forth, so that you really get a good overview of what might happen in this future space. And so just to make sure that everyone understands what deep tech is, deep tech for us always have to do with some kind of a product or startup that is based on a scientific discovery or some tangible engineering innovations, right? So they're very, very often we look at academic papers, we look at patents, we look at those as clues as to how those could be transferred into applications, business applications and use cases. And one of the metrics that we use often is called TRL. TRL is an assessment for the maturity level of a technology that is developed by NASA, starting from the very, very basic, which is TRL1. This is when someone have a kind of an idea, an imagination of a particular, execution of a technology, right? But it's not implemented, it's not tested, it's not built. So you go up these levels until TRL9 is, it's launched, is a product, it is being used, you can buy it. And so between all of these, you have different layers of readiness, and that's called TRL. There are different tools in the market these days to be able to map these maturity level. One of them is envisioning.io, which is one of my favorite, where in the center is the product. And so when that particular technology is already launched, all the way outward is the kind of the ideas that are more conceptual, and more on the kind of imaginative side. And so envisioning.io is really neat in having that visualization in one beautiful map. And highly recommended for those who want to get started in understanding how to use TRL as a matrix. We ourselves, we have another kind of visualization where we apply 3 validation framework. And so we start also in the imagination side. So this is our TRL1. So we start in this realm, but we started looking at data. So this is a data-driven understanding of how things are evolving. So as we're migrating into kind of the science realm, the very first question we ask ourselves is, well, is this even scientifically possible? Whatever that imagination that we have in our head. And so here we look at academic papers, we look scientific published papers, peer-reviewed papers. We look at indications and evidence of whether scientifically this is actually possible. Once we have validated this, then the next question that we ask is, well, can we do this at scale? This is an engineering question. This is where we look at patents and trying to understand how are we able to scientifically convert this into kind of an engineering feast. And if we have validated, then that's the third thing is the business question. So is there a use case for this? Can we do this sustainably? And can we apply this? Is there a need for this? And so as we migrate from kind of the imagination side all the way to the maturity level and having a business application, this is when we understand how a particular deep tech has been evolved. So to give you an example, if we map a particular industry, like in food, plant-based meat, we can buy it in the supermarket in most of the places in the world right now. And so that's already quite validated. But if we look at in vitro meat, which is culture meat, we're still kind of sort of figuring out how to do this at scale. Some of the supermarket in Singapore sells this, but it's far from few. And then there are these realms that is further in the future. I'll explain these projects in a later slide, but they are maybe in the 10, 15 years horizon in that direction. So I wanted to kind of emphasize this three-prong approach that I mentioned earlier. So we often looked into science, but we use science as a way to kind of incite our imagination, and from there we kind of understand how we can apply it in the kind of the business aspect. But it is really a three very diverse and almost opposite in expertise in order to kind of give us a complete picture of this future. And by no means, it's fully completed, but it is one step closer to understanding that space. And so for us, research is super important, and to analyze is really to take things apart. And so earlier we mentioned that we use data as a way for us to kind of manage and understand the maturity level. And so the data then converts in what we're calling data selfie here. And so each of these cards is a data selfie. And we looked at the patents, we looked at academic papers published, we looked at other indexes and trends like number of organizations, funding, press, to give us an overview of the maturity level. Very similar to TRL, but this gives us a little bit more of a complete picture of that particular industry. And then we deep dive into it, right? And then we look at a chart, a network chart of that particular industry. I know it looks crazy, but the blue one, for example, is academic papers. The green ones are, I think the red ones are patents. And then from the red ones are the companies, startups that are working in that field. And so just by looking at this, we can understand where the concentrations are, and we can identify this particular patent actually was very influential because all of these products came from that patent. So we can trace back and really understand the impact of that innovation. And so if we compare the maturity level, right, we look at gender equality, and all we see obviously are academic papers. There are far and few startups that are working on this. Why? Because it's not an emerging technology, and it isn't something that that people have cracked the kind of the business case for it, right? Even though there's a need. Whereas we look at aircraft is extremely consolidated. It's a very mature field, and so what we see here are products. We're seeing companies. We're seeing patents. We're seeing a lot more development coming out of it. So it's a way for us to understand different levels. And then from there, then we synthesize. And to synthesize is to, combine the things that we have earlier taken apart to create something new. And we have this methodology called Synthesizing Future, where we go through these 4 steps procedure to be able to kind of piece it back together. And from there, we create content in different verticals, from the future of food to the future of health. And, lately the hype has been the metaverse, and we're also looking into blockchain. And so together, this is our repository, and we rely on these tools and these playbook for us to be able to kind of navigate these unknowns that I talked about. And so we're not the only one there. I think there are lots and lots of companies that are in the deep tech space. Compound Food, for example, I love this company because they're really imaginative. They're taking on culture meat, except that they're not culturing meat, they're culturing coffee beans, because growing coffee beans is not very sustainable. So they're looking in that route and understanding how we can satisfy our caffeine addiction without ruining our environment. There are lots and lots happening in the food space, from 3D printed meat to culture meat. And then here, these are all examples of initiatives that are started by my colleagues. This is super interesting. They're using the scent of a dog to be able to capture it, and pairing it with AI to be able to, for us humans, to have that high level of sensitivity, just like a dog, and to be able to do ambient sensing, which is very, very interesting. So here are some of the industries that kind of touch base about on a deep tech. That's the different sectors. A lot has to do with AI and health and biotech, but it's not limited to. And so, anything that is within kind of the scientific realm, that there's some kind of a scientific breakthrough as it evolves, is relatively kind of related to what we are considered as deep tech. And I have like probably a lot more slides here, so I'm just gonna maybe finish with this one and then give you some examples of what we do so you have a better idea. But this is a way of understanding what we're calling the pace layers, and it's a framework that has been created by Stuart Brand in his book, The Clock of the Long Now. And here he talks about that different things have different pace of change. So for example, nature is very slow because evolution is slow. And as you go up the layer, you have culture, which is your tradition, which is, as we know, is very hard to change as well. And then rules and regulations under governance, it's faster but still slow. Infrastructure, we talk about hospitals, schools, highways under infrastructure. They're shorter horizon but also very long, all the way up until like fashion and technologies. Those are your fast layers. What's really interesting here is that the fast layers are your innovative layers, are where you can kind of have a rapid kind of prototyping and iterations. But your slower layers on the bottom, they give foundation and they give stabilities. And all of these layers together actually create resiliency in the society in order for us to function in equilibrium, right? And so I bring this up all the time because when you're talking about deep tech, sometimes you need to understand where the deep tech is applied so that you can manage the pace of change. So I mentioned earlier that biotech is a longer horizon. Why? Because you need to different layers will be applied to it, like rules and regulations in biotech is far more strict than if you were to build an app, for example, right? And also anything that is biology on the level of nature will be, will be a far slower layer. So you need to kind of understand and where you are placing your deep tech in this layer to be able to create that balance. So I'm just going to quickly give maybe 4 or 5 examples of what we do. This is in the realm of kind of almost like a speculative design, where we looked into the future of food. This is if you know about cultured meat, people culture meat cells in a petri dish, which is flat, but meat is not flat. Meat requires a volume. So here we're looking at the possibility of a future where how we can use the scaffolding and the cellulose of a tomato to culture meat cells. And we call this plantable meals because if you can culture other type of cells that is not the tomato itself, then you can culture other cells like, onions, garlic, and we call this plantable meals because the whole entire plant, the whole entire meal is being planted and grown. So now you probably ask me like, well, wait, is this even possible? So this is in the kind of the sci-fi, in the beginning of the scientific validation side. We did some research. You can do some planting. So scientists have been able to plant human heart cells inside the spinach leaves, and that the heart cells continue to beat, which is mind-blowing, right? And so they're able to do this. Are we able to scale it? Hell no. We're still really far from it. But it's spectacular,
maybe
right?
In a few decades. But this is really incredible. I think not even thought about this, but it's incredible that they've already done something that goes close to it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, so that's kind of what this project is based on. So I use this as an illustration of understanding, well, there is, the design aspect of it, which is creative, but then there's the scientific aspect of it. Along the same line is electronic edibles. And so here we wanted to separate essential eating from pleasure eating. So your essential eating is what gives you nutrition and your, sustenance. But pleasure eating is your ice cream. It is your chocolate, right? So if we can separate these two and we replace pleasure eating from with the digital means, then maybe we won't be wasting calories and we won't be wasting food. And how do we do this? And so we did a little research, and you can induce taste simply via electricity. And so with this device, you put it on your tongue, you can taste sweet in the tip, salty on the side, umami in the center, and sour and bitter in the back. And everyone tastes differently depending on the sensitivity. But we're also doing another iterations where we're adding a ceramic plate because we learned that temperature also change your sense of taste. So here are a couple of different iterations. The fun thing about separating decoupling is that you can put them back in new ways. So this next iteration of electronic popsicle, we're going to try to add an amplifier to it and connect to music so that we can taste music, right? And so imagine in the future what it means to have like Spotify of taste and what it means to have a playlist of taste in the future. And so that's this. BioBrush is very, very early on. This is a project where we're trying to understand if we can hack your oral health via the biome in your mouth, but using a technology called optogenetics. And so it's light-induced changes in the biome, and so you will see the slide. You can brush your teeth, and it will turn on and off certain aspect of the biome accordingly. And then the last project, and then we can open up for questions. So this is Plantaverse. Plantaverse is our interspecies metaverse project, and so this is Minty, and I think this is Herbie. So we have these plant bots where they're connected to sensors, and the sensors will give different readings. And so we have the pH level, light level, all sorts of different levels. And what we did with these different sensors is that Herbie here, for example, can make certain decisions. When Herbie light is low, he will go to the light source. When the water level is low, he goes to the water source. And then what we did was we pair these different readings into a rendering of a tree. And so the water level might dictate the leaf color, and the pH level might dictate the height of the tree. And so what we have essentially created is a digital twin of these trees. And then we converted them into what we're calling NF trees. We sell them as NF trees, and the money that we gain from the sales of these NF trees, we put it back into sustainable projects so that we can close the loop and kind of help sustainable costs via using this technology. And so I have a lot more examples, but I'm going to stop here because I can go on forever. So.
That's wonderful, but I have the first question that I really want to ask is, what's the technology that makes it possible to understand what the plant needs, like what it wants? How does it know that it wants more water or more nutrients? Is it just understanding what's the current nutrient state of the plant?
Yes, so we have these sensors that measures the level. So when the soil is dry, will indicate that it will need water source. And so that project actually comes from what we're calling autonomy, non-human autonomy. And so we want, in autonomy for us means being able to make certain decisions on its own. And so we started with your basic, Maslow level of needs, your sustenance, this is your light. But actually, we went up another level and say, okay, so let's say Herbie is a tomato plant, and Herbie comes to you, Andrea, and said, hey, would you like to buy my tomatoes? And then you say yes. And so now Herbie sells his own tomatoes. Now Herbie has earned some money, and Herbie has economic power, and Herbie can maybe have a bank account, and maybe Herbie can buy things. My dog here. Herbie can buy things, and Herbie might be able to have a property owner, and maybe Herbie can even be an investor, right? You can take this, very far and beyond. But what if we give the same economic power to humans than we are? And the reason why we wanted to look into this possibility in the future is that we have been sourcing human nature for so long, that been taken things from Mother Nature for so long, that what if we give them their own autonomy and economic power? And what does that mean? And can we actually talk about equity in the more universal sense that is that involves other non-human
species
and make our world a little bit more equitable? Crazy, I know.
That's wonderful. Yes, I think we are all still shocked from electricity that has taste. That's really wonderful. And in terms of the edible electricity, do you think it has any possibility to be scaled and accessible to the market? Is there any vision for it to be marketable, or is there from the way I see it, maybe there's no need, but can we create something around it so that it's marketable and maybe satisfy any need?
I definitely, yes. There are a couple of projects that are on the table right now, and one of them I believe is in the University of Singapore. Don't quote me on it, but definitely in Singapore, where they have created a device, chopsticks that have the same mechanism where you can taste via the chopsticks, so it's connected to some electricity. There's another one that is called e-lemonade. You pour water into the cup, and what you drink is just water, but what you drink, it tastes like lemonade. So also electricity induced taste. There are a couple of these things that are being explored. I definitely think that, you know, there's a way to do it. Some of the problems that we encounter right now with that project is that we can't standardize the experience. What I taste would never be the same as you. So we need to think about a way to calibrate, right? So imagine that your chopsticks need to be calibrated in the future, or your forks and knives needs to be, or your cups and any of the plates needs to be calibrated so that you can replicate those experiences. But it's definitely coming. There's a whole entire field called augmented gastronomy that works into, you know, how your different senses will be played out according to the different devices that you'll be using.
That's wonderful. I think it's awesome. And in terms of futurism, how do you see this field evolving per se, not only the practice, but do you see more and more people joining and this industry scaling even more? And I think there might be a few differences between Asia and Europe. Do you see any, and what do you think will be the next steps for the two places?
There is absolutely a need for this, and I would say that COVID had helped because what it had created was a kind of black spots everywhere. There are a lot of unknowns. All of a sudden, people are questioning about what the future looks like. There's a lot of uncertainties, and on a society level, on a cultural level, we have not been taught any of the skills or culture in kind of navigating futures. And this is one of the reasons why we were very intentional when we're doing those consequences, negative and positive, because so many problems that we're living today is because we have not been intentional about those consequences that those technology might evolve into. And so as these tools and methodologies are becoming more and more mature, I think that we need to start adopting, and like everything else, this is now currently being adopted by companies because they have the resources to be able to continue that discourse. But this actually needs to be infiltrated into our school systems, into our kids, into our way of life, so that this becomes something that it is in our blood to be able to almost like rehearse what those futures look like. And I think Carol has this question, and I'm going to kind of continue with that because it's very, very much on that same topic, which is she was asking about what backgrounds the people working on deep tech projects, what backgrounds do they have? I think that requires we have been very accustomed to your traditional education of, getting a PhD and very, very, deeply rooted in that particular topic, which is great. I'm not saying PhD is in the way that it's bad. What I'm saying is that we also need to have other complementary aspect to it, because to really implement a deep tech solution, you need to understand the strategy behind it. You need to have some imagination of how this can go beyond and above your, the think beyond the box kind of a paradigm. You need to have all of these different experiences to be able to kind of understand the potential and the risks that might involve. So, so going back into the Futurescape map, while you yourself might not have all of the skill sets needed, and we never will, this is when you need the kind of the collective intelligence to come in. So when you do the Futurescape, you invite people that are opposite from you. You invite people that have different perspectives, different culture and different background, so that you can really map out what the space might look like.
Wonderful, thank you. I know there are some people that have a lot of questions, so if you may leave them in the chat box or Q&A, or even raise your hand, I will be able to open the mic. So you can go. I know Alicia had a question, but I don't see it. Okay, never mind. Sorry, it was Carol's. Okay, so I also had a question that it might be more general, but how do you communicate as an entrepreneur? How do you communicate with investors, governments, and scientists when you introduce them your projects? Because I can imagine that there's a lot of people that might not have the same views, or they don't understand it. So what's your approach, and have you ever been faced with any difficulty in that sense? And how do you overcome it, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. So we are very, very heavy on what we're calling engineering and prototyping futures. And what that means is that we break this down into 3 ways of approaching prototypes. I'll make one word contextually to understand that prototyping is your best way of thinking. So if you are on the theory realm, you're always kind of theorizing the possibilities, then it's all theory. You haven't answered any of the question. Up until you prototype it, tangible prototypes, then can you really answer the questions that are in hand. And so we're really heavy on prototyping, and we separate it in 3 ways of prototyping as we go deeper and deeper into our exploration. And the first type of prototype we call it a conceptual prototype. And this is usually a illustration, it's a drawing, it's a video, very much like the tomato video that I've done. It's a way to kind of get people to understand what you're trying to communicate. And so that's a very, very basic way of prototyping. The second level of it is called experiential. We're trying to replicate a particular object or thing. And so there, for example, if you're building an app, you don't actually have to code and build an app, right? You can use Post-its. Every Post-it is a screenshot, and you can put these buttons and draw them, and then you can show to someone and say, hey, how would you navigate around this? Does it work? And so here, what you're looking for is feedback, user feedback. So this is when you apply it, you replicate this experience to someone else so that they could give you feedback on that particular thing. The very last one is called functional prototype. Here is extremely tangible in terms of, it could be hardware, could be software, could be code, but you're trying to test a particular functionality. And so this is when you're in the MVP level, you're building it, and you want to make sure that the limitations of that technology has been validated. And so as you amp up into your into finding answers for the unknown, then you go deeper and deeper into these different types of prototype. And this is the only way that you can communicate with all honesty the progress of your project is to have first-hand data via these prototyping.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I guess the answer is prototyping. In short, it's really awesome. And yes, I can see already that we didn't even think about electricity with taste. And after we showed it, we are already in love with it. So I can only imagine how that's really, really useful to showing to people that might need to invest or approve the process. So that's great. In terms of Equal so things that help women and startups, what do you think are the next big things that we need to promote gender equality or maybe inclusivity? What are the next trends maybe, or things that we need?
Ooh, that is that's a
complicated one. Yes.
It's a very complex issue, and I think one of the things that we really wanted to drive across is to make women understand that some of these obstacles, some of that boundaries, we place ourselves. thinking that, oh, this is too hard, AI is too hard to learn, or quantum is really hard, it's far and beyond, I would never get it. Don't cut yourself short, I would say. While it is very, very difficult to change the society in their biases, it's very hard to change a lot of different systemic problems that are external to us. But we need to, the easiest thing that we can change is ourselves, which is to make that first step in, making sure that those boundaries and those, technological, question and uncertainty actually lies within us, and we can make that first step.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was really complicated question, and I think everyone is trying to put their own contribution in it or do it through Women in Power. But I think just being active in the tech scene and contributing with innovations and initiatives, it's a really great way to do it. We have 2 questions at the moment. The first one is from Loris T. They're asking how could we promote innovation, development, and industry collaborations in tech? I guess the way we can also interpret this is maybe how can we promote collaboration between different countries as well, or different continents? I think that's a good point of viewing it. And it's still open a bit, but if you have any opinion that could answer this.
It is a tough question, but I'm glad, Lawrence, you brought it up, because when we're talking about deep tech, and a lot of the deep tech actually is related to major challenges that we're confronting as a society, whether it's climate change, or privacy, those required a consortium of players and an ecosystem in order for it to solve. The problem itself is way too complex, and so creating these platforms and these kind of aligned incentives is necessary. And so on one hand, we need to remembering that pace layer chart and be able to build those resiliency. We need all the players involved, and so when we're talking about getting the collaboration that we need to go layer by layer and see how we can make those alignments happen. It's not easy, and I don't think that until today we've been able to do it, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't. And I'm really excited with the blockchain technology. I know that there's a lot of kind of misused or artificial cosmetic usage of blockchain, but because blockchain allows for transparency and traceability, I think it actually could help the collaboration aspect of how people can contribute, right? And then you no longer need to have the bottleneck of going through a government or going through a third party in order to place our trust on that level of collaboration.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What a wonderful answer. We have 2 last questions I think that we can take. So the first one is from Alicia. How would you create a culture of future visions and future making in a company? So we've looked at it from a cross-border vision. Now, how to do it from the inside of a company per se?
Yeah, so this is a good question. This is a question that we get a lot of times, and I have for us the very first step to kind of instill this kind of culture is we actually package this in the way so that companies can understand. And so we call it futures as a service, so that they can make it relevant to understanding that it's platform as a service or software as a service. It just becomes part of their culture, right? And the other thing is that we call this a rehearsal. We call every single future practice or a prototype or brainstorming, futurescaping. Every one of this is a practice towards the future, a rehearsal of the future. And the more practices and the more rehearsals that you have, the more prepared you are. And so when we frame it this way, then the company understands that this isn't a luxury. You're not, we're not investing in the luxury of once we have a little bit more budget time, then we will, spend on it. No. You better be prepared now, because if not, it will be too late. So we often frame it this way, and it has been very successful in making understand how this is important for companies.
That's awesome. Yes, totally agree. Yes, and we also have a question from Annie Lee. And I think this is a really great question, and I think it would be very useful for everyone here. Where's a place you gain inspiration or insights as a starting point, and what do you recommend to someone in their earlier career path in this industry? I think this is a great question.
I am a hoarder of information and news. I'm the absolute worst. I'm one of those that are like in bed and I'm still reading articles and whatnot. But MIT has an amazing, amazing newsletter that they come out, once or twice a week that talks about different technologies, emerging technologies, and it's an amazingly good source. There's a platform. Now I can't remember. Maybe I'll share it with you, and you can share it with the participants. Where basically it's a whole list of top 50 trend reports that they publish at the end of every year. And so it gives you a kind of like where, different technologies are heading towards and, and the pace of change. There are a lot of different areas. So right now, I just get on top of my head. It's I have a list. Maybe I can share afterwards.
Yes, sure. Feel free to share with us, and we will send in the email summarizing the event. I think that would be really useful for everyone. Yes.
Hello Tomorrow, I would say as an event, Hello Tomorrow, it's a fairly good source to go and understand deep tech. I would say look at Meetup, look at whatever platform there is in your country of like gatherings and meetings, search for deep tech, search for innovation technologies, long-term thinking. This is the Interval, the Long Now Foundation. It's an amazing resources to kind of understand some of these different framework of looking into the future. But I have a lot more.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We're looking forward to reading them, and I think everyone here is already looking forward. I think next question, last one we can take is from Maverick. What things can be done to upskill and retrain to mitigate the deep tech talent gap? So we have this very deep questions today.
Yeah, no, those are super good question. I think it's not a short-term solution because our education system does not allow for that kind of flexibility, right? And it really drives us into this deep path of like PhD, doctoral, ultra expertise type of education, when kind of the deep tech approach really need to be more broad. So at the end of the day, what the talent that is required of this is that they have deep and broad, right, with what's called the T-shape, which is really hard to come by. And so I think from the very beginning, we need to kind of change our educational kind of structure, and then allowing companies and organizations to create new framework that incentivize risk-taking in those areas, so that they're not penalized for making those mistakes. But little by little, we'll get it there. But I do want to say, for all the men and women out there who's interested in deep tech, I think you need to. There's no better way than to just get started and get your feet wet and talk to people, get to know the startups, volunteer for some of these platforms, and really get yourself started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And yes, for anyone who is interested in talking about this topic more, I'm sure Cecilia can go on for hours. And we are very happy to have had you on here with us, because you've shared with us incredible things, and we are very happy. Definitely got our attention in any way possible, and we are a huge fan of your projects. So it has been really awesome having you, and we will share the resources mentioned, and also more information about All Women and Futurity Systems with you in the after email as well. And we can also take a group a group picture if you would like. If anyone wants to be in the group picture, can raise the hand and open the camera, and we can take one. Awesome. Okay, one hand raised. Okay, oh, you're a member. Two. Okay, if no one else. Okay, I allowed someone to be with us, but I cannot see it anymore. I'm not sure.
We can Photoshop.
We can just, yes. Anyone who wants to just take a picture with the background and we will add it in. 3, 2, 1. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to have had you today, and we are looking forward to continuing the conversation. And also remember to join our WeChat group for those who are interested. We will send the QR code in our after email as well. And thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Awesome. Thank you, Julia. Thank you. Talk to you later and take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.